morning and welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam on a very rainy Monday. So, I was going to do more this weekend, but I was busy. It was a family member's birthday, and that occupied a good amount of my time this weekend. So I did not see Ticket to Paradise, nor did I get through as much as I wanted to. But I did watch this last night. Before we get into it, if you want to support the show, you can go to multipleworldsproductions.com/pre-order and pre-order either Echo, you can pre-order either Echo Delta Part 1, which is coming out in late November, or We Are Better Than Our Worst Instincts, which is a sequel to Our Past Does Not Define Us. That will be coming out in mid-June. So, those are both coming. You can't stop them even if you wanted to. So, strap yourself in for that. And again, multipleworldsproductions.com/pre-order. We are going to be doing a, We're going to be doing a cool, maybe we'll do a giveaway of something like real, like if people pre-order, like send in your pre-order receipt, we'll give you a free something. I probably have something in my bag, some digital code that hasn't been given away yet, or I'll buy a new movie and give the digital code from that away. Yeah, maybe we'll do that. I'll look into that, and we will do an announcement when we put up the video on the podcast, probably this weekend. Probably going to record that on Saturday, give or take. But, anyway, we are going to talk about Doctor Who, The Power of the Doctor, the hour-and-a-half long regeneration special that ends Jodie Whittaker's era and starts the next era, and I'm going to go ahead and put a spoiler warning on this, because I'm going to spoil it and talk about a lot of the stuff in there. Now, one of the things with this episode that I thought was pretty cool was the idea that this is what the 50th anniversary should have been. And this, I understand, is the centenary special for 100 years of the BBC. And this is what the 50th should have been. The 50th anniversary, the time of the Doctor, it was called, was very much focused entirely on what happened with, within the era of like new Doctor Who, since the revival took over. Very much focused on showing that Jesus fucking Christ, the rain's picking up. I hope it doesn't impact the sound too much. Very much about the war on Gallifrey and all of that, because he is the last of his kind, the Doctor, and all of that notwithstanding. So, looking at what this special is, this is very much about who the Doctor is and what they do. And it's like you bring in a little bit of everything. You bring in a little bit of old, you bring in classic villains, you bring in, the Master is back. It's like this is just all things that have, kind of happened over the course of the run of the show, that they're kind of putting all in here for you to understand, and pay homage to. And I think that here it works very well. There's nothing about this episode that feels kind of off. It feels very much like they're firing on all cylinders. The whole, the whole thing where the forced regeneration, where they regenerate, like the whole thing is the Master's going to regenerate into the Doctor's body, and become the Doctor, and then he's going to go out and ruin the Doctor's reputation. It's a really good idea. and it gives you a lot of fertile ground to play in. So what we end up with in a lot of this episode is you're not really dealing as much with the Doctor as the Doctor. You're dealing with the Doctor a lot within the confines of a hologram. It's kind of like that episode of Rick and Morty where Rick dies and Morty needs to resurrect him. So you have the clone Rick kind of following him, like the hologram Rick kind of following him around. It's kind of like that, except it's not played for laughs. So, and the thing is too, because it's a hologram using past information about the Doctor, you're also getting past iterations of the Doctor coming and talking to people, because there are other characters come in, like Tegan and Ace come back, and they have a pretty big role in the episode working at UNIT, but the bringing in the past actors to play the Doctor is a really good idea. I really like that they did that. And this feels like more of an homage to older stuff. The fact that you have Peter Davidson, not to be confused with Pete Davidson. Peter Davidson coming back in his role. When the Master comes out after he is the Doctor and he's wearing the Doctor's clothes, he's not wearing one iteration of the Doctor's clothes. He's wearing this weird mishmash of everyone, including like the Fourth Doctor's scarf. And then he sits down and he's got the flute, and it's like everything about it just kind of meshes very well into being this giant thing about everything. And I forgot the actor's name who plays William Hartnell now, because William Hartnell has since passed, because he was 900 years old when Doctor Who started in 1962, 1963. It's a great... He played Filch in Harry Potter. I forgot the actor's name though. But he came back too, and Sylvester McCoy and Paul McGann. And I feel like Paul McGann's kind of not doing a ton, like as an actor just in general, because he came back and it's... alright, like, what else did he have going on this week? Like, and he's in a very small part of the episode because, like, his iteration of the Doctor only had the one movie, and then he had the short before the Day of the Doctor that showed his regeneration into the War Doctor, because he regenerates into William Hurt, and then William Hurt regenerates into... See, and that was the other thing, too, is that entire special it became an avenue for retcons in the way that, like, what's his name? Moffat wanted to make his stamp on the franchise and alter the canon, and that's what the entire thing is about at the end of the day. But, fuck, like, to take the 50th anniversary and turn it into, like, you looking at how great you are, it's like, that's just ego for ego's sake. And for this to happen, and then she does, die in the episode, Jodie Whittaker's Doctor. Like, and I think that the way her regeneration is handled is probably one of my favorites. I have not seen Capaldi. I have not seen Capaldi's regeneration. I remember, what's it called? I do remember Matt Smith into Capaldi. Was not a fan of that one. I liked, Eccleston into Tennant. I liked Tennant into Matt Smith. I feel like this one is another good one because it's not just a matter of her regenerating into, the next Doctor, which we'll get into who that is and what that could mean after this, because, I mean, look, at this point, if you can't figure out from what I'm saying that it's not the guy who they hired to be the next Doctor, then I don't know what to tell you, but, I'm looking at this, and she's starting to die, and the regeneration is starting to happen, and I think one of the other things that this episode really does is it gives you a sense of why every time the Doctor is regenerating, it feels like there's an emotional impact to it that's not just the actor is leaving the role, and the actor's been in the role for quite a bit of time. And I think that that's kind of a good use of time in this episode. It's an interesting way to approach it. To be like, okay, so we have... There has to be a reason why they're sad to go, and not just, okay, well, I'm dying, but someone else is coming. And, that was a great idea, I think, to really introduce that, looking at the past, like her sitting there and looking at the past iterations, sitting in this area and just being, and it's like, look, you're not joining us, obviously, because, you're there, we're all here. That was a really great plot device, too. And for me, I think the plot of the episode is less important. I mean, I think what you get out of this episode is a lot of really great character moments and a lot of really great nostalgia moments, and I think that really works. The plot of the episode is kind of straightforward, because it's all about the Master trying to get into the Doctor's body, and that is, and become the Doctor, and it's a great thing. And as I'm watching, I'm like, this is a little bit like, this. I mean, I don't know how far back this goes in Doctor Who, and I don't know when this was introduced in the comic, but this feels a little bit like Flash, Reverse Flash. A little bit, not a lot, but it's a cool idea. So this whole kind of look at what's going on in within the confines of what regeneration means for the Doctor it's a great use of time within the episode, and I think that's a great. And then when we get to the end and it is time for Whittaker to go, it's now no longer just this moment of, oh well, it's still the same person, it's just personality changes and all of that kind of changes, and it's a great it's a great thing. I'm watching the show. I don't understand why people don't like Jodie Whittaker. I really don't understand it. She's just so likable the entire time. I've seen now a total of 2 episodes and this special with her in it, and I'm just like, I don't understand. How is that something that they're not different with? And look, at the end of the episode, I think we get a first here. I mean, it's not the first time it has been It's not the first time it has been done ever. But I think it's alluded to, if I remember correctly, the Day of the Doctor does allude to the idea that the Doctor can regenerate back into people who look like their former selves, because there is that character, the Curator. And again, I haven't seen the special in 10 years, but I seem to recall Tom Baker coming back for 1 or 2 scenes as someone called the Curator, who is a future iteration of the Doctor. And I seem to recall that. I could be wrong. I could be very wrong about that. But that seems... So, when we get to the end of the episode, she regenerates. And I wasn't a fan of it when I watched it, because it's always a part of the first episode after the regeneration. Is the going back... And in this case, he's not going to be around for long. I think he's only got 3 episodes, and then he regenerates again into the next guy, whose name I'm forgetting. But when she regenerates and she goes back to being David Tennant, famously the 10th Doctor that everyone loves, or at least I really like, and tend to know people who really like the 10th Doctor, his clothes regenerate too. And to an extent I understand that, because I don't think that they wanted to have him... And again, I said this last week when I did the Flux discussion. I said, I don't think there's anything about the way that the 13th Doctor dresses that makes her clothing kind of stuck. Her clothing is not incredibly... she's not wearing a dress, she's not wearing a skirt, she's not wearing anything like that. Her clothes are kind of just normal clothes that, it would look strange on David Tennant, but it wouldn't look out of place. And you always get that, because when they regenerate, their clothes don't change. But I think for the sake of this, because he's only going to be there for a few episodes, and we're regenerating into someone that is already a known quantity. I think the clothes regenerating, I can kind of understand that, because it's like the idea of him going back into the TARDIS and being like, okay, so we have to, find that outfit from a decade ago because that's what I like to wear, and all of that. It's a really interesting idea they went with on that, and him coming back and going like, I know these teeth, because like the first thing he says when he regenerates from Eccleston into Tennant is new teeth. That's like it's a nice little nod, and I think it's interesting. I would like to see them give an explanation as to why, because that was the big thing I got from the end of the episode, is that regenerating into a past self. And I think that was the weird thing too, was that this iteration was not there in that scene in the past, or not in the past, when they're in his when they're in his head, and they're talking, and he's talking to all the past iterations, or some of the past iterations, because it's like she's talking to she's talking to Hartnell, she's talking to everyone. I'm not getting back into it, we already listed them out, but and then 5 through 8, so she's talking to them. Tennant's not there, and I am curious as to I feel like the thing is that was more of a thing of, if we put Tennant in here, I mean, people were already predicting before the episode aired that Tennant was going to take over for a small tenure, and then it was going to go to the next guy, which I feel like is kind of a smart decision, because it's a nice little on-ramp for people to come back onto the show. To be like, look, we have this known entity. We have David Tennant, and everyone loves David Tennant, and he's going to come back for a little bit. Awesome. And that's cool. But at the end of the day, I'm stuck on a train. I don't know if they're thinking about it where it's like, the criticisms were legitimate, because I feel like that's the thing, is that a lot of the criticisms that were levied against 13 were not legitimate criticisms. So look, at the end of the day, I mean, there has to be a reason, because for him to be like, what? I mean, to do his what thing at the end, like, there had to be a good reason as to why this is something that he wouldn't understand. Maybe there is going to be a point of like, oh, so, this happens when we need something, like for the plot. I mean, not for the sake of bringing people on, but there has to be a good reason. There has to be a good reason for the sake of the plot as to why he came back. And I think that's one of the things that we get from the end of this, where it's like, he does all of that. And I think it was funny. It should have, me personally, watching the credits, I would have said, instead of introducing David Tennant as the Doctor, I said I would have gone with and reintroducing David Tennant as the Doctor. I don't know if they've done the Valyard yet, because the Valyard was an old villain. It was a future iteration of the Doctor that was evil, and they don't, I don't think they've done that yet, or brought him back in the modern era. I'd like to see them do that, though, and I think that, that would be cool if it turned out that this was the Valyard iteration. I think that'd be a cool thing for them to go with. But I think for the Centenary special, this was exactly what it needed to be, because this is a special homaging 100 years of the BBC existing. Because it is 100 years of the BBC existing, it has to play into everything or as much as it can from the past. And I think it does it very well. I feel like there was an interesting, this is a very interesting way of doing it. And it's very fun. If you're a fan of the franchise, if you were a fan of the franchise and fell off around the time a lot of people did, because that was the thing too, is that there's a broader conversation to be had about Doctor Who in its when it started. or not when it started, but Doctor Who when it came about in the mid 2010s, and it became kind of it was a big thing for a little bit. Between by the time that 50th anniversary came, the 50th anniversary was huge comparatively, and it has kind of fallen off since then. And I feel like that has something to do with the fact that when Doctor Who came back, there was kind of like this lull in science fiction content. Because when Doctor Who came back, I don't think there was an iteration of Star Trek on TV. I don't think there was an iteration of... There was no Star Wars, because Star Wars didn't come about until 2015. I mean, it didn't come back. There was... I think the Clone Wars was still going on. When Doctor Who came back in 2006, it was still, there was this weird lull in serialized or otherwise science fiction content in the mainstream for people to glom onto. So people glommed onto it. Like that, and I remember Supernatural was another huge one that people were like, holy shit, this is great. We have to, consume every minute of this. And Supernatural went on 15 seasons. And I feel like we're in a similar situation with Doctor Who. And then part of what hurt Doctor Who was its release schedule being we're going to put out a new episode a new season every year and a half or so. It's like American audiences weren't adjusted to that, and I think even audiences everywhere were like, fuck this, I'm not going to sit here and wait, 18 months between seasons just for no reason. And there's also this resurgence of British TV, whatever, notwithstanding. This is a great way to jump back on if you haven't watched Doctor Who in a while. But we'll wrap up there for today. And until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.